Today is Friday, September 3rd, 2021, which means it's Derelict Friday. Hello, fiendlings. How the hell are ya? Good chaos this week. I managed almost 14,000 words on Station 3 since we last spoke. Sounds like a lot, but it really should be much more. I only stopped my streak because of paid-for stuff that had to get done. Still, it was respectable, and I finally found my way in. What the hell does that mean? Sometimes I have to organize my thoughts into the dreaded outline. I usually end up doing it either in the middle or at the very beginning, but everything was wrong this time. None of it made sense. The technology, the way it was being used, just everything. I guess part of me wanted to be writing another deep sea exploration book rather than what I was supposed to be writing. Funny thing is, this book will help that one out. It's when I realized that I just decided to have fun. I'm having way too much fun with it right now. That's something I don't think my characters are having in Derelict, though, boastful brags notwithstanding. So before we join them, how about you have a sip of corpse coffee and get ready to descend into chaos? Visit corpsecoffee.com and put the dead in your cup. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 39 of Derelict, Trident. Chapter 64. Dunn kept Carbonaro's squad cam feeds front and center. He watched the Lance Corporal as she swiveled in the turret, her weapon firing deadly chaff to drive back the coming hordes. Atmos steel flechettes and deadly tritium shot into the growing darkness. Starfish and pinecone remnants floated through space around the QM bay like the debris from a hurricane pushed ashore. Her Marines had managed to disengage most of the clamps. Only 2 left, and they could start hooking up Black to the QM bay. A message from Black appeared on his block. He opened it, and the grim expression on his face turned to intense fear. "Carbonaro!" he yelled. "Big bogey's coming! Hurry the fuck up!"
"Copy, sir,"
she said. Carbonaro sounded as though she were speaking through gritted teeth.
"Squad, incoming, and we gotta get the fuck out of here!"
A chorus of eyes followed. Dunn could tell the Marines were doing their best, but one of the clamps was stuck. "Black," he said over the block. "We need help." "Blue has finished connecting to the hangar bays. She should begin moving out momentarily." "ETA?" 5 minutes. He cursed. "Not fast enough." He switched to the exterior cam feeds and stared at the amorphous shapes approaching, each of them at least twice the size of S&R Black. "We don't have 2 minutes, let alone 5. Black didn't respond to that statement. Instead, she sent him a new cam feed. He didn't know where the camera was placed, but it was definitely a view from the shipyards. Trident Station barely visible, as if clothed in shadow. Neptune's light was fading away as though the void itself were feasting on photons, slowly devouring all light. Dunn wasn't sure, but it looked like the shroud was growing. Something flashed by the camera, followed quickly by dozens of more shapes. At first, he thought there were more creatures flying over the shipyards on their way to Trident and the gathering horde, but he was wrong. These shapes glowed as though lit with an inner fire. "What?" The feed disappeared. "Black, what the fuck was that?" "Unknown, sir. The feed appeared in my systems, and I forwarded it." "Where did it come from?" "The shipyards. No sender." "Where are those things headed?" Black paused a beat. "They will be in our space in less than 10 seconds. Dunn banged his armored fist against the bulkhead before speaking over the command channel. "More bogies incoming. Keep up the chaff as long as you can. S&R Black's Marines could use some help." LeBlanc immediately responded.
"I'm sending you another SV. It'll be there in less than 30 seconds.
"Copy," Dunn said, his voice barely audible. Another cam feed appeared on his HUD. Dozens of bright pinpoints, looking much like stars viewed through a cloudy nebula, pierced the shroud. Dunn clenched his fists and his teeth. This was it. They were dead. It was over. Whatever those things were, they were coming straight for Trident Station and the QM base. S&R Black and her Marines were going to die, along with the rest of humanity. Another second ticked off. The myriad of lights diverged, moving as though they were terrestrial aircraft flying through the clouds rather than in the vacuum of space. 3 of the bright points veered off and headed behind the station. The others continued moving straight at S&R Black, but he thought they were slowing. They came to a stop as if hitting a wall, but they didn't shatter or explode. The pattern of lights formed by the now stationary projectiles flashed once in unison, the blast of photons as powerful as raw sunlight. A large swarm of starfish that had been headed for the QM base slowed and changed direction, reminding Dunn again of extinct bird species. Or maybe a school of fish seeking a rich food source. Dozens of the starfish headed for the light. The shining spheroids then scattered in different directions, each strobing with those powerful blasts.
Got it, sir!
Carbonaro shouted. More starfish streamed past the QM base and headed for the new sources of food, some of the larger swarms diverging and choosing different targets. The strange missiles strobed again, then faster. Alerts hit his HUD and those of every Marine in the 2 companies. Solar flare. His cam feeds disappeared en masse for the space of a heartbeat, and S&R Black shuddered as if hit by a pressure wave. Reality seemed to ripple around Dunn before stabilizing. What the void was... His cam feeds returned. The shroud that had descended around them, obscuring all but a tinge of Neptune's brilliant blue, had been pierced, and the regularly shaped tunnel led directly to the shipyards. What the void was that? Dunn asked.
Unknown. My sensors detected an abnormal amount of gravitons, not to mention the intense photon storm. I believe they were bombs of some kind, designed to attract the creatures before activating their payloads.
He found himself nodding. Distract and ambush from the same source. Old strategy, new implementation.
Clamp free!
Carbonaro said.
Connecting to S&R Black now!
Dunn wiggled his toes instead of tapping his feet. This was taking too long. Whatever had opened that hole...
Captain Dunn,
LeBlanc said.
We are accelerating.
Don't wait for us. Head for the shipyards and we'll catch up.
And if you don't?
He shrugged, although she couldn't see it. Lucy, you come back as fast as you can and push the hangars into the QM bay. Then blast out of here. Copy, she said.
We'll get moving, but I'm not going very far.
Trust me, you won't be far away if we fail. Done out. A new alert flashed on his HUD. Skiff 3 and another SV were coming to assist. Good thing, too. The creatures had been stunned by the blast, but hundreds of starfish had regrouped and so had countless pine cones. The massive shapes in the darkness inched closer, their nearly invisible tendrils cutting streamers through the darkness. His space was about to get even more crowded. Dunn flipped to Carbonaro's cam feed. She was back to firing, but had switched to narrow-focused flechettes. She was done with the chaff. Another flip, and he watched the Marines through Black's belly cam. The spindle was down, and they were double-timing it. Dunn nodded to himself. He'd have to give Lucy's Marines his compliments when this was all over. They were faster at this than any S&R company he'd seen.
QM Bay teams,
Talby shouted over the comms.
Swarms inbound. Stragglers making it through.
No one replied, because no one had to. Carbonaro immediately shifted her turret in that direction and fired the last of her chaff. The first few starfish that made it past Talby ran into the storm of flechettes and tritium. Their shells exploded, shrapnel pattering the skiff and Carbonaro. Dunn heard confused shouts from Carbonaro's squad, and he flipped to the bellycam feed, and his face went white. Dozens of pine cones had flanked Carbonaro's skiff and were attacking the Marines. He watched in horror as 3 pine cones slammed into one of the Marines and knocked him off the skiff and into open space. A starfish immediately swooped in and made off with the screaming Marine, his comms disappearing in a wash of static.
Fuck!
Carbonaro screamed and swiveled her turret again. She couldn't cover her Marines and keep the damn starfish at bay at the same time. An SV flew close enough to the skiff to make Carbonaro yelp. Salvos of chaff exploded around the QM Bay mooring points. The tritium and flechettes did little damage to the Marine suits, but it was devastating for the pine cones and 2 starfish that had joined the party.
Move your asses!
Lieutenant James, Air Commander of Blue Company, shouted over the comms. The 3 remaining Marines struggled to attach the spindle. Carbonaro shouted at them, and James was shouting orders to her SV nulls and skiffs. Dunn muted everyone apart from Carbonaro and Talby. He was helpless beyond watching the feeds. The ship trembled as Black loosed another salvo of long-range missiles. Dunn didn't want to see what she and Blue were firing at. He'd know soon enough one way or the other. Either the Marines would make it happen, or everyone would die. James's SV had streaked past the QM bays and her Marines, but she was back, and her gunner was hitting targets seemingly at will. The problem was the number of targets kept increasing.
"All! We've lost the spire!"
Talby yelled over the comms. From the SV's cam feed, Dunn saw what Talby meant and felt like screaming. A massive tentacle, or something like it, had shattered a portion of the spire's shell. Starfish, pine cones, and monstrous things he couldn't even describe moved toward them in the dark twilight. The number of hostiles was staggering. "We're going to lose," he whispered. Chapter 65. Once Dunn, Karb, and Copenhaver were safely out of range, Noble took a deep breath and tapped the mooring release control. The medical bays, or whatever you wanted to call this, ship, shuddered and a dull thud vibrated through the Atmos steel shell. If that's what the hull was even made of. At this point, Noble wasn't sure of anything. He tapped the controls and winced as M-Bay 1, that's what he was going to call this strange craft, drifted back into the station. With artificial gravity engaged, he should have found himself bucking against his seat restraints. Instead, his body didn't even react. Gravity, he thought after a moment. His confusion melted into a grin. M-Bay 1 was powered by gravity drives. It would only make sense that the fucking machines would upgrade the personnel areas for protections against that sort of impact. Noble found the comms button and tapped it. "We're launching. Hold on to your seats." He'd already selected their destination as Titan Naval Station, and he stared at the readings one final time. Through M-Bay 1's cam feeds, he watched S&R Blue's Marines begin the process of unhooking the hangar bays. "Good luck, Marines," Noble breathed, and tapped the Engage button. M-Bay 1 moved away from the moorings in spooky silence. If he were on S&R Black, he'd hear the ever-present hum of the engines and the whisper of recycled air flowing through the vents. M-Bay 1 made no sound. Noble didn't like it. He didn't trust things that didn't make noise, and he sure as shit didn't trust things he didn't understand. The craft continued moving away from the moorings, Noble's eyes flicking from one cam feed to another. Something was happening near the QM bays. Before he had a chance to zoom in, M-Bay 1 accelerated. Now he felt a slight tug in his belly, just a smidge of gravity pulling at him. The ship's external cams showed him Trident Station quickly disappearing behind them. "How fast are we?" He glanced at the speed indicator and gulped. It would have taken S&R Black more than 20 minutes to reach this speed. M-Bay 1 had done it in seconds. M-Bay 1 burst through the shroud and into clean space, stars popping into existence as though someone had ripped a tinted film off the universe. The sight nearly made him cry. M-Bay 1 was still accelerating, Trident Station and the creatures already far behind them. Noble tried to interface with the cam feeds from both S&R ships, but received nothing. Comms were more or less useless with all the radiation the creatures were putting off. Neptune had become a storm of EM, and no radio waves were going to penetrate that mess. How would he know if Dunn succeeded? He swallowed hard. How would he know if Dunn failed? Acceleration continued. McRoberts was sitting in Medbay 3, more than happy to be in a couch and resting while monitoring ship's comms. Dunn had put the woman in charge, but she'd already delegated flight decisions to Noble. For the moment, M-Bay 1 was his ship. Although in truth, he was just looking at readouts, monitoring what the instruments told him, and letting the nav computer do the rest. A boring job. Normally, he'd be happy to be bored, especially after what they'd been through, but now he had nothing to occupy his attention, nothing to help fight the anxiety creeping into his thoughts. His mind built narratives for situations that hadn't happened, and most likely wouldn't, but they unrolled through his thoughts like torture hollows. He closed his eyes shut and tried to focus on nothing. The console beeped. Noble opened his eyes and stared at the message on the screen. QE message received. View? The void is a QE message, he asked the console. It didn't reply. Radio wasn't getting through the radiation surrounding Trident, nor laser nor any other comms tech they had. QE? Was that a brand name, or was it... Noble's eyebrows jumped. Quantum entangled comms? He moved a finger over the view option, and the message appeared on the holo display. He blinked at it, blinked again, and then smiled uneasily. So much for boredom, he said. Black needed a push. A moment later, he crafted the reply and sent it off, his fingers shaking slightly. Before he could talk himself out of it, he reprogrammed the nav computer to return to Trident. Attention all, Noble said over the ship's comms. We're executing evasive action and maneuvers. Please get ready for a bumpy ride. Noble stabbed the execute button and clenched his eyes shut. The gentle pull of gravity started again, a little more forceful this time. That might further damage the wounded in Bay 3, but hey, if he didn't turn around right now, it wouldn't matter anyway.
Noble?
McRoberts' voice said over the comms.
What's going on?
Sir, Noble said, suddenly wishing he had block comms back. They need help at Trident. To Noble's surprise, McRoberts paused for no longer than a heartbeat.
As you were. Keep me updated.
Noble grinned. McRoberts might have a word or two for him when this was all over, but the engineer-turned-pilot really didn't give a shit. Aye, sir. With that, he brought up the documentation for fire control. Went?
Aye, sir.
Get your ass in here, Noble was smiling. I got a job for you.